The courtyard air tasted like metal and ozone. Captain Arya Chen stood rigid at attention as the Galactic Council's flagship descended, its shadow swallowing the human embassy whole. 6 months of diplomatic preparation, countless briefings about proper protocol, and now her entire career balanced on this single moment. The ship's landing struts kissed marble with barely a whisper. Arya's hand didn't move toward her sidearm, but her fingers twitched. Old instincts died hard. The boarding ramp extended. Ambassador Throck emerged first, his crystalline exoskeleton catching sunlight like shattered glass. Behind him walked Queen Velixera of the Zafrani Empire, 8 feet of coiled muscle and iridescent scales, her crown a living thing of bioluminescent tendrils. Arya had studied every documented appearance of the Queen. None of the footage captured the weight of her presence, the way the air itself seemed to bend around her. Then came the whispers. Not from the Zafrani delegation, their discipline was absolute. The sound came from the human diplomatic staff, from the journalists behind the barriers, from everywhere and nowhere. A small figure shuffled behind the Queen's honor guard. Arya's enhanced vision caught details her brain struggled to process. The child, she had to be a child, no more than 7 in human years, was Zafrani, but wrong. Her scales were mottled, pale where they should gleam. One eye was clouded white. She walked with a limp, her left leg twisted at an angle that made Arya's chest tighten. Genetic defect, someone muttered behind Arya. Surprised they let it live. Probably a servant spawn. Gods, it's hideous. Arya's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. Protocol demanded silence. Protocol demanded she stand like a statue while these fools poisoned the air with their casual cruelty. The child's good eye fixed on the ground, her shoulders hunched inward as if she could fold herself small enough to disappear. Queen Velixera moved with liquid grace toward Ambassador Rodriguez. The formal greeting began. Complex hand gestures, the exchange of crystallized breath samples, words in 3 languages that meant unity and cooperation, and all the beautiful lies diplomacy required. Arya tracked every movement, every slight shift in posture. Security threats could emerge from anywhere. The child stood forgotten at the edge of the delegation. One of the Zafrani guards positioned himself to block her from view, but not before a human photographer's flash blazed across her face. She flinched like she'd been struck. Something in Arya's chest cracked. The ceremonies dragged on. Speeches about interspecies cooperation, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. Arya counted heartbeats, measured breathing patterns, watched for the subtle tells that preceded violence. Nothing. Perfect, sterile diplomacy. Until the child stumbled. Her weak leg gave out on the smooth marble. She went down hard, a small sound of pain escaping despite her obvious attempt to swallow it. The nearest human staffer actually stepped backward, putting distance between himself and the fallen alien. Arya moved before thought could stop her. 3 strides put her beside the child. She knelt, mindful of her armor's bulk, and extended her hand. The child stared at the offered palm like it might be a weapon. "Easy," Arya said softly. "Let me help." Every eye fixed on them, human and alien alike. Arya felt the weight of those stares like physical pressure. She just violated 17 different protocols, touched a member of the royal delegation without permission, broke formation during an official ceremony, inserted herself into a moment that demanded invisible perfection from the honor guard. Worth it. The child's small hand trembled as it touched Arya's. Her skin was cool, dry, textured like river stones. Arya lifted her carefully, keeping her weight centered, mindful of that twisted leg. The girl couldn't have weighed more than 40 pounds. The child whispered in heavily accented standard. Her voice was raw honey and crushed flowers. "You're welcome," Arya replied, then added words that felt ripped from somewhere deeper than training. "You're safe here." Arya felt the shift like electricity across her skin. She'd crossed some invisible line, shattered some unspoken rule she couldn't possibly have known existed. Ambassador Rodriguez's face was a mask of horror barely contained. The Zafrani delegation stood frozen in perfect formation, but their scales had darkened to deep purple. Fear or rage, Arya's briefings hadn't covered which. The Queen moved. Each step was thunder contained in flesh. She crossed the space between them in heartbeats that felt like hours. Arya maintained her position beside the child, her hand steady on the small shoulder. If this was where her career ended, so be it. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed. Queen Velixera stopped 1 meter away. Her eyes were liquid gold, ancient and utterly alien. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made Arya's bones vibrate. "You touched Kessa." An observation that somehow contained multitudes. Arya met those golden eyes. You fell, Your Majesty. I helped her stand. That's what we do. What anyone should do. The silence stretched. Somewhere behind the barriers, a camera shutter clicked. Queen Velixara's crown tendrils shifted, moving through colors Arya had no names for. When the queen looked down at Kessa, something in her expression softened in a way that transcended species. Yes, she said finally. Yes, I believe I am beginning to understand why we came here. The diplomatic reception continued inside the embassy's grand hall. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across walls decorated with art from 40 species. Arya stood her assigned post near the eastern entrance, rigid and professional despite the tremor still running through her hands. She'd been pulled aside by Commander Reeves during the transition between venues, subjected to a blistering whisper lecture about protocol and consequences and career-ending decisions. She'd absorbed it in silence, offered no excuses, accepted that disciplinary action would follow. She'd do it again in a heartbeat. The crowd flowed around her, ambassadors and trade ministers, military attaches and cultural liaisons. Arya tracked threats out of habit while her mind replayed those few seconds in the courtyard. The feel of Kessa's hand, fragile as bird bones, the way the child had whispered thank you like the words were prayer. Movement near the Zephyrini delegation drew her attention. Queen Velkara stood surrounded by human diplomats, her translator working overtime as she discussed tariff regulations with the enthusiasm of someone discussing paint drying. But her eyes kept drifting across the hall, searching. Following that gaze led Arya to a corner where Kessa sat alone on an ornate bench, her twisted leg extended carefully before her. The child watched the gathering with that same hunched shoulder wariness, as if expecting the world to remember she existed and react with fresh cruelty. No one approached her. The other Zephyrini maintained their positions near the queen, perfect and gleaming in their formal armor. Human guests gave Kessa a wide berth, either from uncertainty or distaste. The child might as well have been invisible. Arya checked her assigned sector. Clear, stable, no threats apparent. She had perhaps 3 minutes before the next scheduled position rotation. 3 minutes to make another catastrophically bad decision. She crossed the hall with measured steps, her boots silent on marble. Kessa noticed her approach, that good eye widening slightly. The child's breathing quickened. Mind if I share this bench? Arya asked. My feet are killing me. Confusion flickered across Kessa's face. She glanced toward the Zephyrini delegation, then back to Arya. You wish to sit with me? If that's all right with you. They say I am unsuitable for company. Arya settled onto the bench with a controlled exhale, like the armor weighed twice what it did. People say a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. Kessa studied her with an intensity that felt older than her years. You are the guard who helped me. Arya Chen, Captain, 3rd Honor Guard. She kept her voice low, conversational. What's your name? The queen spoke it. I'd like to hear it from you. I am Kessa Tivelin of the Lesser Pools. Daughter of... She stopped. Started again. Just Kessa. Good to meet you properly, Kessa. Why do you speak with me? The others do not. Even my own people... She trailed off, her good eye fixed on the gathering crowd. Arya followed her gaze. She saw what Kessa saw. The way conversation stopped when eyes landed on the child, the slight turns of shoulders that positioned bodies away from her, the careful maintenance of distance as if her differences were contagious. The others are fools, Arya said quietly. And cowards. Kessa's head snapped toward her. You should not say such things. My deformity brings shame. Stop. The word came out sharper than intended. Arya gentled her tone. You're not deformed. You're different. There's a distinction. My scales do not shine. My eye does not see. My leg will not straighten. Kessa's voice was flat, reciting facts like catechism. I am broken. This is truth. Doesn't have to be yours. Arya turned slightly, careful to keep her assigned sector in peripheral vision. Where I come from, we have a saying. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Know what we do with that nail? Kessa shook her head. We build whole structures around it. Turn the difference into something essential. Arya tapped her own chest, where scars from a training accident had left tissue twisted beneath her uniform. I got hurt when I was 17. Told I'd never serve in combat capacity. Doctor said my lung capacity was too compromised. But you are here, a guard for your people's honor. I'm here because I decided their limitations weren't mine. Worked twice as hard. Found different approaches. Made the weakness irrelevant by making everything else stronger. Arya met Kessa's gaze directly. You think you're broken. I see someone who moves through a world that wasn't built for her and does it anyway. That's not weakness. That's the opposite. The Queen brought me to your world as lesson, to show that even the lowest Zephrani deserves witness to great events. But I know the truth. I am here to be forgotten at the edges while the worthy shine at the center. Does the Queen seem like someone who does things without purpose? The Queen has purpose for all things, but I am not the purpose. I am the contrast. Kessa's voice dropped to whisper. The shadow that makes the light brighter. Before Arya could respond, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Ambassador Rodriguez approached the Zephrani delegation with visible nervousness, his translator struggling to keep pace. Queen Velixara listened to something with her crown tendrils pulled tight against her skull, a sign of displeasure, according to Arya's briefings. Then the Queen's eyes found Kessa and Arya. The temperature seemed to drop again. Queen Velixara spoke rapid-fire commands in her native language. The Zephrani honor guard moved as one, repositioning with military precision, creating a corridor through the crowd, straight to the bench where Arya and Kessa sat. Oh no, Kessa breathed. Oh no, I have brought you trouble. Arya stood, came to attention with parade ground perfection. Whatever happens, you did nothing wrong. The Queen covered the distance in seconds that felt eternal. Up close, her presence was overwhelming. Pheromones that bypassed conscious thought, harmonics in her breathing that triggered primal responses in the brainstem. This was what apex evolution looked like. This was power that transcended mere physical strength. Queen Velixara stopped before them. She studied Arya with those liquid gold eyes, then looked down at Kessa with an expression Arya couldn't parse. Captain Chen, the Queen said, her standard flawless despite the translator device hanging unused at her throat. You continue to violate protocol. Yes, Your Majesty. No excuses, no deflection. You risk your position, your career, the diplomatic relations between our species. I understand the consequences, Your Majesty. Do you? The Queen's crown tendrils shifted through crimson and deep blue. Explain to me why you would sacrifice so much for a child who is not your own, who is not even your species. Arya chose her words carefully. Because she needed someone to see her as more than her differences, and because it was the right thing to do. Right? According to whom? According to the part of me that knows better than to let fear disguise itself as propriety. Silence crashed through the hall. Every conversation stopped, every eye fixed on them. Queen Velixara's expression was unreadable. Then she looked down at Kessa, and her voice gentled in a way that made Arya's throat tight. Come here. Kessa stood on shaking legs, using the bench for support. She limped forward until she stood before the Queen, her head bowed so low her chin touched her chest. Look at me, Queen Velixara commanded. Kessa raised her head slowly. Even her good eye brimmed with tears she refused to let fall. The Queen knelt. The motion sent shockwaves through the Zephrani delegation. Several guards made aborted movements, as if to stop their monarch from lowering herself, but discipline held. They watched in rigid silence as their Queen knelt before the lowest member of their species. Queen Velixara cupped Kessa's face with hands that could crush steel, held her with gentleness that defied her size. What is your full name, child? Kessati Valen of the Lesser Pools, Your Majesty? And who told you that you were broken? Kessati Valen of the Lesser Pools, Your Majesty. Every single person who saw you and decided your worth based on scales that do not gleam, based on an eye that sees differently, based on a leg that walks its own path. The Queen's crown tendrils wrapped around Kessa's head like a living crown. They told you that you were less. They told you that you were shame. They told you that you were to be hidden at the edges of important moments. Yes, my Queen, they were wrong. The two words fell like hammer blows. Queen Velixara stood, lifting Kessa with her, holding the child against her chest where her dual hearts beat strong enough to feel through armor. I brought you to this world for many reasons, the Queen said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall, to witness the signing of the first treaty between Zephrani and humans, to learn of cultures beyond our own, to see how other species conduct themselves. She turned, holding Kessa so the child faced the gathered crowd. But mostly I brought you to find the answer to a question that has haunted me since I took the crown. No one dared breathe. What makes a person worthy? Queen Velixara continued. Is it the perfection of their form? The gleam of their scales? The power they wield? Her gaze swept across her own delegation. We Zephyrani have long believed that physical perfection reflects spiritual worth, that those born different are born lesser. We have built our entire civilization on this premise. She looked down at Kessa, still cradled against her chest. And then I watched a human, a stranger to our species, bound by no obligation to us, cross every line of protocol to help a child who had fallen, not because that child was important, not because there was anything to gain, but because she saw suffering and could not look away. Queen Velkara's voice hardened, while my own people, perfect and gleaming, stepped backward, while they maintained their distance from one they deemed unworthy of touch. The Zephyrini honor guards stood rigid, but their scales had paled to ash gray. Captain Chen, the Queen said. Approach. Arya moved forward, every muscle screaming awareness of how thoroughly she destabilized this situation. She stopped at attention before the Queen, eyes forward. You ask no reward for your actions, Queen Velixara observed. I expect none, Your Majesty. You act without thought for consequences. I act without thought for consequences. I act despite them, Your Majesty. The Queen's crown tendrils flared wide, surprise, possibly approval. This is what humans call compassion. Then perhaps we Zephyrani have much to learn about what it means to be worthy. She raised her voice to address the entire hall. I declare before all witnesses that Kessati Valon is no longer of the lesser pools. She is now Kessati Valon of the crown's own heart, daughter of my household, sister to my bloodline. Gasps rippled through both delegations. Several Zephyrani dropped to their knees. Kessa stared at the Queen with her mouth open, her good eye wide with shock. You will be educated in the capital, Queen Velixara continued, speaking directly to the child now. You will study beside my own children. You will want for nothing. And anyone, Zephyrani or otherwise, who dares call you lesser will answer to me personally. Tears finally spilled down Kessa's face. But I am not worthy. I am broken. No, child. You were surrounded by broken people who tried to convince you that their blindness was your flaw. The Queen looked at Arya. It took a human to show me what I should have seen from the beginning. That worth is not measured in perfection of form, but in strength of spirit, in resilience, and the courage to continue despite a world that tells you that you should not. She set Kessa down gently, keeping one massive hand on the child's shoulder. With her other hand, she gestured to Arya. Kneel, Captain Chen. Arya's heart hammered. She dropped to one knee, head bowed. The Zephyrini Empire has no higher honor than the crown's gratitude, Queen Velixara said formally. It is granted to those who perform acts of extraordinary compassion that change the course of our understanding. It has been awarded 17 times in our 10,000-year history. She placed her hand on Arya's head, her crown tendrils extending to brush against Arya's hair. For seeing worth where we saw only difference. For acting with courage where we acted with cowardice. For showing us that strength comes in many forms, and that true honor lies in lifting those who fall rather than stepping over them, I grant you the crown's gratitude, Captain Arya Chen of Earth. You are now and forever a friend to the Zephrani people. Warmth flooded through Arya's chest, literal warmth radiating from where the Queen's tendrils touched her. Some kind of biological marker, transferring pheromones or chemical signatures that would identify her to all Zephrani as protected. Rise, the Queen commanded. Arya stood. Kessa stood beside her, the child's twisted legs steadier than before, as if the Queen's declaration had given her strength beyond the physical. Queen Velixara addressed the hall one final time. Let it be known that this treaty between our peoples is built on more than trade and military alliance. It is built on the understanding that we have as much to learn from humanity as they have to learn from us, perhaps more. For they see with eyes unclouded by generations of prejudice. They act with hearts that know compassion is not weakness but the truest strength. She turned to Ambassador Rodriguez. I believe we have much to discuss about the cultural exchange portions of this treaty. I wish for Kessa to remain on Earth for one solar rotation, to study at your institutions, to learn how humans teach their young to see past difference. And I wish for Captain Chen to serve as her guardian and guide. Rodriguez's face was a battlefield of emotions. Your Majesty, I'm certain we can arrange something. No. Queen Velixara's voice was iron. Not something. This Captain Chen specifically, unless she declines the honor. All eyes turned to Arya. She looked down at Kessa, saw hope blazing in that good eye like a star being born. Saw a child who'd spent her life being invisible suddenly being seen, being valued, being told that she mattered. "It would be my honor, Your Majesty," Arya said. The smile that broke across Kessa's face could have powered a city. The diplomatic reception dissolved into chaos after that. Good chaos, the kind that came from fundamental paradigm shifts. Zafrani delegates who'd maintained careful distance from Kessa suddenly couldn't approach her fast enough, offering blessings and gifts and apologies that came too late to be fully sincere. Kessa handled it with grace beyond her years, accepting their words with quiet dignity while staying close to Arya's side. Commander Reeves appeared at Arya's elbow as the crowd began to disperse. His face was unreadable. "Captain Chen, a word." They stepped into a side corridor, away from the noise. Reeves studied her for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "That was the most spectacular breach of protocol I've seen in 20 years of service," he said. "Yes, sir. Completely inappropriate. Potentially catastrophic. Could have ended your career. Yes, sir. Instead, you're now personally honored by an alien queen and serving as guardian to what amounts to Zephrani royalty." He paused. "The brass is going to have my head for this." "I'm sorry, sir," Reeves' stern expression cracked. "No, you're not. And honestly, neither am I." He clapped her shoulder. Sometimes the right thing and the proper thing aren't the same. You chose right over proper. That takes guts. Also stupidity, but mostly guts. Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. You're about to have the most complicated assignment of your life. That child has been through hell. Undoing that kind of damage doesn't happen overnight." "I know, sir." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Chen, you did good. The kind of good that matters more than medals or commendations. Remember that when things get difficult." Arya returned to the hall to find Kessa surrounded by human children, offspring of various diplomatic staff who had been kept to the edges during the formal proceedings. They'd descended on her with the absolute lack of filter that children possessed, asking about her scales, her eye, her leg, treating her differences as fascinating rather than shameful. Kessa looked overwhelmed but not distressed. One little girl, maybe 5 years old, had taken her hand and was explaining something very important about her stuffed rabbit. Kessa listened with the intensity of someone learning a foreign language. Queen Velixara watched from across the room, her expression softer than Arya had yet seen it. Their eyes met. The queen inclined her head fractionally, acknowledgement between equals. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Formal dinner, speeches that felt less hollow now, cultural performances from both species. Kessa stayed close to Arya throughout, her initial wariness gradually easing into something like trust. As the gathering wound down, the queen approached them one final time. "Captain Chen, a private word before I depart." Earth's sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that had no Zafrani equivalents. The queen stood in silence, watching the light show. "You must understand," she said finally. "Kessa's situation is not unique. Across Zephrani space, there are thousands like her, cast aside, hidden, taught that they are lesser because they do not fit our narrow definition of perfection." "That's going to change now?" Arya asked. "I will do everything in my power to make it so, but changing a culture takes time. Generations, perhaps?" The queen's crown tendrils dimmed. "I cannot undo the damage we have done, but I can ensure that no child suffers as Kessa has suffered. And I can show my people that there are other ways to measure worth." "Why bring her here?" Arya asked. "Why not just declare the change yourself? Because declarations from on high are easily dismissed as the whims of royalty. But a story? A moment that captures hearts and changes minds?" Queen Velixara looked at Arya. "Stories spread. They take root. They grow into movements. When my people hear how a human guard helped a fallen child, when they see how that child rose from shame to honor, when they witness a culture that values compassion over perfection, that will do more than any decree I could issue. I could not have predicted you specifically. But I believe that if I brought Kessa to a world where difference was celebrated rather than scorned, something would shift. You gave me more than I dared imagine." The queen reached into a fold of her formal robes and withdrew a small, crystalline object. "For you. A personal gift, separate from the crown's gratitude." Arya accepted it carefully. The crystal was warm, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. "What is it?" "A memory stone. It contains the genetic signatures of my entire bloodline. If you are ever in danger, if you ever need aid, crush it. Any Zafrani who senses those pheromones will come to your defense as if you were Crown itself." She paused. "I do not give these lightly. Your Majesty, I don't—" "You showed me that I had become so focused on maintaining tradition that I had stopped questioning whether that tradition served us. You reminded me that a queen's first duty is to her people. All her people, even those we have wronged." Her voice roughened. "Especially those we have wronged." Arya closed her hand around the crystal. "I'll keep her safe, I promise. I know you will. That is why I chose you." The queen turned back toward the hall. "1 year, Captain Shen. Transform my daughter from a child who believes she is broken into a young woman who knows her strength. Show her what it means to be whole despite the world's insistence that she is not. And if I fail, you won't." Queen Velixara's crown tendrils flared in what might have been a smile. "Because you are the woman who breaks protocol when compassion demands it. Who kneels to help children who fall, who speaks truth to power without fear." She paused in the doorway. "Besides, Kessa is far stronger than she knows. She survived years of cruelty with her spirit intact. With proper support, there is nothing she cannot become." The queen departed with her delegation shortly after, a cascade of formal goodbyes and diplomatic flourishes. Kessa watched them leave with an expression Arya couldn't quite read, relief mixed with uncertainty, hope tangled with fear. When the last of the Zafrani ships had vanished into the night sky, Kessa turned to Arya with her good eye bright. "What happens now?" she asked. Arya looked down at this child who'd been called ugly, broken, shameful, this child who stood straighter now, who met her gaze directly, who'd been given a chance to become something more than the world had told her she could be. "Now," Arya said, letting herself smile, "now we figure out together who you want to be when everyone stops telling you who you should be." Then, for the first time, she smiled back, tentative but real. "I think," she said slowly, "I would like to be brave." "Like you," Arya replied, reaching down to take that small, cool hand. "You already are. You've been brave every single day just by refusing to disappear. Now you get to learn what brave looks like when the world isn't trying to crush you." They walked back into the embassy together, Guardian and Ward, human and alien, two people who'd found each other in a moment of crisis and decided that compassion mattered more than protocol. Behind them, Earth's sun finished setting, painting the sky in fire and gold, and in the darkness between stars, a queen returned to her empire, carrying a story that would change her people forever. A story about a child who fell, and a human who helped her stand.